on it?
Yeah, he's gonna be about 5 minutes late. He's got his wife's and oldest son on a mission trip in Venezuela, and so he's got the 2 younger kids, so he's had to drop them off.
Oh, that's his one. I guess that's as good an excuse as any.
Oh, Taylor won't be here. Did you just get that message?
Yeah, and if
So,
you
yeah, I
just want to make a
haven't
note of his
talked to
presence
Chris
tonight.
Jerry's agreed to take minutes for us today. Since,
Before,
Paul.
I think you were, maybe, no, it was
No,
before
because
that.
that's too accurate.
It was before that, because I was on my way to the, so.
Okay, I turned my recorder off.
But I would like to go ahead and call us to order. It is 6 o'clock. I assure you that we will be done before or at 7:30. And then we'll adjourn again at another date, but I'm not going to disrespect your time or mine by carrying this out longer than that. So that being said, I think it's going to be just a few minutes late, but if there's some questions that we can discuss about, if you have a chance to look at the balance sheet or the income statement, to have any questions about the IBA projects in general, and then maybe collectively we can ask Blake when he gets here.
I have one for Tommy, because I think he might know. How much money, percentage-wise, of the budget of the county as a whole that IBA can commit to debt against our budget? Is there a set figure?
You talking about today? Yeah, that's item 4.
Yeah, we'll get that, that's on,
Oh, is it?
Yeah. It's item 4 on the agenda.
item 5.
Okay.
For review economic development millage rate.
All right, I got 5 on mine, but okay.
Did you get the,
He sent
okay,
a new one.
you didn't get the official.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I didn't know what that meant, because
Because Rebecca took it and made it official.
That
and
means,
redid it.
that means debt, okay.
Yeah, millage rate,
Excuse me, I don't want to interrupt your meeting already, but can you guys go around the table and just identify who you guys are?
And that's,
We probably need it for our own. but-
yeah, that's a good idea. Peggy, would you start?
I'm Peggy Howland.
Jerry Johnson.
I'm Mike Scott.
I'm Kenneth Byrd.
Tommy Graham,
David Barnett.
and I am not standing up.
And Raymond Phillips, and neither am I.
Either one was getting wet.
Sorry, it needs cleaning.
Is Terry not gonna be here?
Yeah, Terry is not, oh, I don't know, Terry didn't say he was not gonna be here.
You just got an email, or it was just on my phone.
For him?
Uh-huh, he's held up something.
Okay.
Here's Blake. Blake is here.
Did you find, did you got a copy?
Oh, he isn't coming then.
He's in Atlanta. Oh my gosh, if he's in Atlanta, he won't never get here, because it said it was taking an hour to get from 400 to
Dallas was able to get here before we leave. I would like, before we have someone to speak, is just for us to kind of go over what we perceive as our intent here is for why we've been called together. And so does anybody know why we're here?
I have an assumption.
Okay.
I think we've been asked to see and look at the IBA, the way they operate, and see if we think that's appropriate, or make suggestions the way they operate, or if we think it's fine the way they're doing it, or make suggestions what we think can improve it, or if we don't think it's needed at all, whatever, you know.
Okay, and I think that's accurate. Is that what I'm supposed to look over, to make a determination whether or not it's a viable asset to the community? And is it performing as it's been called to do since the 60s? And I don't think it's been looked at much since then, and so maybe there are some changes that we can ask for, or along those lines, and even maybe recommend many other things. So with that in mind, let's just keep in mind that we're here for, I think that's the reason why I've been called, is to be proactive, to do, we're all concerned about the community, as everyone in this room is, and that needs to be our focus. As for me personally, I don't have any agendas. I just want to fulfill this duty that they've kind of called us to do, and that's the best of my ability. So with that said, our first thing is going to be status on the update on the IBA projects. And I think Blake, if you're here, if you would you mind coming up and
Sure.
kind of helping us with that? We got a signature here, that's okay.
You'll have to sit by Mike.
You wanna look at this as you,
Well, now, he's gonna do something else.
okay, I just,
Yeah. That might help.
I think what we've asked you may have something else in mind, and that's fine too, because it may open us to something we need to think about, but, we kind of want to know what's going on, and, are those projects being, fulfilling the original intent, which we know, and before we go, I would like to just read what the intent is, and it's in the, D5 of the, legislation. It says to encourage and promote the expansion and development of industrial and commercial facilities in Paulding County so as to relieve insofar as possible unemployment within its boundaries. And to that end, to acquire by purchase or gift in any building or structure within the limits of Paulding County, so forth and so on. But to encourage and promote the expansion and development. So that's kind of what we're asking, what projects are going on, because I think we're all limited on what we really know.
Right.
So if you can help us with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And please just interrupt me at any given time with the questions that you got, because I think it's probably a dialogue is more beneficial to you than anything else I could really do. So just kind of go down the list of things that we've got underway, properties that we have and whatnot. We have basically three what I call industrial parks that we're pursuing continued development and continued construction in. The one that you've probably heard the most about is the Paulding Commerce Park. Paulding Commerce Park's over off of Bill Cruz Parkway. It is about, I think that piece of property is around 110 acres. It may be a little larger than that. Some of it is in floodplain. There is a pretty good sized pond on the property, very, very challenging topography. That's the piece of property, if you are aware, that used to be the spray fields, for the sewer treatment plant. Yep. So, this is going back, I guess, probably around 2009 or so when we acquired that property. Of course, we acquired it from the county. We have an agreement with the county that says, and I'm just paraphrasing, of course, but basically says that we will take that property, we'll develop it, and as we sell parcels of property in that park, we'll reimburse ourselves for the development costs, and then once the development costs are reimbursed, we will pay the county for the property. And if there's any funds that are left after we pay for the development costs and we pay the county for the property, anything that's left after that basically is divided between the two entities. It's divided between the IBA and the county. So that's basically how that was set up.
So currently from the county, it's a gift to be paid at a later date.
Yeah, I don't know if gift is a good word. I'd go with that one, because if we don't repay it, then I don't think we'll be getting anything else from the county anytime soon. But, that's basically the way that's set up. And of course, when the county modified that sewer plant over there, when they changed the sewer plant so that they could do direct discharge of the treated sewer into the stream system, then they no longer needed the spray field. So basically, the technology made the spray field obsolete. So at that point, it became a good piece of property for the Industrial Building Authority to look at because of location and whatnot. As of right now, I'm sure y'all probably know this. I don't mean to rehash things that you already know, but as of right now, there's one tenant in there. It's Interroll. Interroll was a project that came in, I guess, 2 years ago, and they're a manufacturer based out of Switzerland. They're actually a German company, but they're headquartered in Switzerland. They manufacture rollers for conveyor belt systems, all different types of conveyor belt systems. We have probably, I guess, currently two other prospects for the park. A couple of things that we're doing in the park right now is, one, we're getting ready to master plan the rest of the park. We did an initial master plan, and what we found out when we did the initial master plan, that park was originally intended to have rail service in it. And when we started doing the master plan for the park, we realized that rail wasn't going to work in there. And the reason that it won't work is because of the difference in the elevation of the property versus where the rail line is at. In order to get the rail into the property, you can only have like a 0.5% grade on rail. So a 0.5% grade coming up into that property, we're gonna have to lower the entire property like 50, 55 feet in order to be able to get rail in there. Well, that would be
That's a lot of dirt.
that's a lot of dirt, but the problem is that it's mostly rock. So it's not a lot of dirt, it's a lot of rock. So when we did borings on the site and took a look at how much rock is there on that site, we actually took the data and sent it to a couple of different quarries and inquired about the possibility of being able to quarry that property because there's so much rock on it. As it turns out, we tested the rock, and the rock is hard, but it's not hard enough to be used as quarry rock. So what we have is rock that can't be used for really any construction, so it's just an expense. Yes?
A question.
Mm-hmm.
Do y'all have a way of gauging, since y'all's, the cost of what y'all done versus the jobs created, when y'all think you know, I mean, do y'all gauge that? You know, so it's, y'all here to develop and to bring the jobs and development into the county. And with the cost of that part, do y'all keep up with cost versus what you created jobs to see how it pays back?
There's two different things that we do. One thing that we do is whenever we get a prospect in, if it's a sizable prospect, then we'll have what's called a loci study done, or I forget the other name for that, but it's an economic impact study, essentially is what it is. The one for Interroll was done by Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech does them. There are some private companies that do them. Georgia Department of Economic Development can do them.
Is that paid out of the IBA?
We were able to get Georgia Tech to, I think they donated that one. I don't think we.
But if they didn't, that would be
If they didn't, we would have to pay for that study,
Okay.
that's right. But if it's a Georgia Economic Development initiated project, we can usually get them to do it, and if it's not, then Georgia Tech sometimes will do it. And actually, I think we paid $1,000 for that study. I don't think they could do this, I think we did have to pay for it. But it's not super expensive to do, it's, $1,000, $1,500 to do one. And it will give you basically the cost benefit of the project. It'll tell you if this is what you're intending to do with the project as far as incentives and things like that, this is what the payback or the value of the project is.
But we're not gonna know that until you get it
Until you get the
fully
prospect.
developed and find out how many total jobs go in there.
Well,
Well,
you're
based on
doing
what you
it
got
on a
right
per
now, you
parcel.
don't, you've
Yeah.
only got one company in there.
Yeah, you're basically doing it on a per parcel basis.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
we essentially know what the development costs are, or at least we know what the development costs
For
are,
that
what we've done so
parcel,
far.
that property, not the
Right,
whole
exactly.
110 acres.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're able to take the cost and basically divide it up over the property, so you have a per acre basis for
Okay.
the cost, and then you know what the value of a project is through the study.
All right, and I'm just trying to determine what kind of authority that the IBA has. And so when we talk like Interroll, who, was it the authority that discussed tax abatements?
Yeah,
I mean,
interesting.
Was it the IBA that was handling that, or was that someone else that comes in and discuss what the county offers?
There's two different things with tax abatements. The first thing is that tax abatements are typically negotiated, at least on the front end, they're negotiated by the Economic Development Organization, which is Jamie Gilbert and his group. So they're typically done by Jamie. However, the Economic Development Organization does not have the legal ability to do tax abatements. The only entity that does have that ability is the IBA. The county doesn't even have that ability. It's illegal for the county to do it, but it is legal for the industrial building authority to do it. And that's a function of the way the Constitution and the law is set up in the state of Georgia. That's got nothing to do with Paulding County. It's just the way that the state is set up. The state has created this system. We have a law that's called a no gratuity law in the state of Georgia, which means that you can't give anything to a company. The government can't give anything to them. So the state figured out this method of doing tax abatements utilizing industrial building authorities. So that is, I wasn't around in 1962, but I suspect that was the main reason the industrial building authority was set up in 1962, was because that's the only entity that can do tax abatements. So therefore, if you don't have an industrial building authority, you can't do tax abatements.
So when these discussions are taking place, Jamie's kind of handling it. In the meantime, he's talking with the IBA and of course with the commissioners, because ultimately,
Yes,
I mean, just saying, hey, what can we do? This is what they want,
That's right.
and there's a negotiation going on.
that's right. Every tax abatement involves, the Economic Development Organization involves the IBA and the Board of Commissioners. So, we.
They're not always involved in the whole body. I mean, the Board of Commissioners do not vote on that.
That's correct. The
That
the
is
only
not
one
a
that
vote,
votes-
we have a
yes.
vote on.
The only one that votes on is the IBA, because they're the only ones that have the legal ability to do it. So we're the ones that vote.
So
on the tax
if, for
abatement.
instance, Enroll's tax abatement did not come to the Board of Commissioners for the Board of Commissioners to vote on.
But you had, I mean, let's just get real, you had input. I mean, there was some discussion, right? I mean, obviously, the
From
commissioners
a-
on the,
From an overall board, no.
Well, can this board, the IBA board, commit the county to debt without y'all approving?
Not debt.
No,
That's
that's
not
not debt.
debt.
I know,
That's
okay,
debt.
but.
No, they can't commit to debt, but they can abate taxes
Yes.
without a
Without-
Board of Commissioners vote.
We don't have the ability to do bonds or loans or anything
We-
without the backing of.
Yeah, financially you can't, you have the authority, but ain't nobody gonna loan no money
That's correct.
without us backing.
What's the limit on the abatement?
The limit on the abatement, there isn't a legal limit on the abatement. What we've done, and this is mostly Jamie's work and not the IBA's, is Jamie has taken other tax abatement programs that exist in the state of Georgia, and he has put together a formula that's based on three pieces. It's based on the number of jobs that are created, it's based on the average wage of the jobs, and it's based on their capital investment, how much they're spending. And with those three pieces of data, he has formulas that spits out, okay, this is what the tax abatement should be in order to be competitive for this particular project.
and it may be in 4 years or whatever before it really sort of starts paying back. I mean, there's some length of time sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes if you have a 15-year abatement,
Right.
it may not pay back until the last 5 years.
But he's taking into account, but it's offered this job, it's offered this and that. I mean, so during that time, there's benefits.
Sure, of course.
You
there is.
gotta look at the
Yeah.
other side.
And that's what the loci
Yeah.
shows is, what is your net benefit from the whole?
Well, that was one of the questions that I think most of us would have, is that at some point, that's, I would call that a pro forma, you know, to
Yeah,
where
so-
someone's saying, is this worth the risk?
Right,
You know, and what's the reward
that's exactly right.
for us to take this risk? So, that's,
Yeah. And
it's not mandated
That's
that
correct.
that be done.
That's correct. And I'm not gonna sit here and tell you, we haven't had some pretty heated conversations about whether or not an abatement should be given or should not be given, or whether it should be at this level or not at this level. And I'm just throwing this out to you. I don't believe in tax abatements for retail. I just personally don't believe in it. It's my opinion, it's not necessarily.
But it can be done.
It can be done.
First Walmart located in Paulding County, they sold
Mhm.
industrial revenue bonds to build the shopping center
Yeah.
to bring Walmart here.
Okay, and we would say that was a huge success?
Done in, I would say so, yeah, it's first Walmart we ever had.
79 or 80, nowhere in there.
It was in the eighties.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, vacant parcel is not gonna generate
On
much
the
tax dollars anyway, so the other thing
That's
is.
right.
But it brought jobs, it brought,
Well, I mean, to do
Sellers.
nothing auction, in other words, if you don't track
Right.
the business, then you're gonna be sitting there not generating much tax revenue.
Right.
either. Why not have the jobs?
I agree.
And we have to be competitive with other communities.
We have to be
do
competitive,
that.
not only with other communities in Georgia, but with other states. Most of the projects most of the projects that we're competing with, it's not just a Georgia project, it's a multi-state project.
And at the time Jamie's competing, you don't always know, you don't know what the state's gonna do, so you have to offer what you're willing to offer locally in order to get them to narrow you down before the state ever gets involved.
Yeah, and the state kind of sort of takes the position, and I'm giving you my opinion, I've been working with them for 8 years now, that they've created an environment in Georgia which is conducive to business, which is conducive to bringing in businesses, and they heavily depend on the locals to attract those businesses and bring them in. I mean, Georgia Department of Economic Development brings projects to us, but they expect us to put the offer on the table. And if we're not going to put an offer on the table, well, then that project, the next time they have a project comes in, it's not going to visit Paulding County, it's going to visit Douglas County, or it's going to visit Bartow County, or it's going to visit some other community that puts deals on the table. They don't bring projects to counties that don't do that.
Yeah, well, then, I know it can, you explained just a little bit, if the IBA gives somebody, say, 10-year tax abatement, we're talking about county taxes, is that
School
correct?
taxes, too.
School taxes?
That's correct.
Okay,
Fire tax.
then how do you gauge, because the IBA tries to sell, we're not trying to create jobs that'll help pay for all this, but in reality, y'all are not making them pay anything to get them here. So when is the offset happen, as far as it being beneficial to the taxpayer?
Right. We use the studies, like the loci study, to determine how much of an abatement we feel comfortable giving. But we've never done 100% abatement. In other words, if this project's going to generate $10 million over 20 years, we're not going to abate $10 million. We might abate 60%, 50%, 70%, depending on, again, how many jobs are created, what the average wage is for those jobs, which is a big deal to us. We don't want to abate a project if the wages are less than what our current average wages are. So that's basically going to bring people's spending ability down if you're just creating jobs that are lower paying than the jobs you already have. So we're pretty stringent on the types of jobs that we're looking to abate, which is one of the reasons that I don't feel like it's okay to abate retail.
Do you know what the average wage in Baldwin County is in, that you're talking about, what the
I
present
think it's 30.
average?
I think it's 35 or 34.
Okay.
But we have those numbers. I mean,
I just didn't know if you knew it off the top of your head, what the current.
Jamie would know it off the top of his head because he deals more with those specific numbers than I do. But it's 35,000.
Okay,
So we're trying to attract jobs
that are paying at least that
yeah,
or
at
more.
least that or more.
Well,
Exactly
and to
right.
move on, can you go to the next project? I know we talked about the total Baldwin Commerce Park.
Yeah, the next park that we have is the Dallas Industrial Park, which is right over off of Business 6, adjacent to BLD. Y'all know BLD's at. Yes. That particular park is one that, and you'll see a little bit of a theme as I talk about these things, but it's one that was kind of a joint partnership with the county as well. And what I mean by that is the county didn't own the property was bank owned. But the county was looking for a location to build the new sheriff's training facility. So we had looked at that property once already, and as I said, it was bank owned, so we had looked at it once already and determined that the price wasn't quite right for us to convert that. That was a residential subdivision with no houses in it, to convert it from residential to industrial. However, the county came to us with the sheriff and said, hey, we're interested in the back half of this property. We think that it would make a great location for this sheriff's training facility. We understand that you guys had looked at it. So we said, yes, we had, and to make a long story short, we ended up going and buying the property and reselling the back half of the property to the county to put in that sheriff's training facility. So it worked out well for us because part of the reason we decided not to buy the property the first go around was because that back part of the property wasn't really usable for industrial because there was too much topography on it. But because it was usable to them and they wanted it, we were able to cut that piece off so that the county, we took the rest, which was usable for industrial, and turned that into the Dallas
All
Industrial Park.
right, just walk us through that too.
Yeah.
All right, so then where does the IBA is making this decision? And
Yes.
and keep in mind, we're just trying to determine how it works, how it
Yeah.
functions, so that we can make an educated, recommendation.
Right.
So the IBA says, hey, all right, we recognize this is what we want to do.
Mhm.
All right, so then what's next? I mean, how do you acquire the funds to purchase that property?
Yeah, that particular piece of property, I think, was purchased, if I remember correctly, I'm trying to remember whether we used the old 2011 bond fund or whether we used, it seems like we used cash reserves on that.
Okay, so there wasn't any need to issue a bond?
No, we didn't issue a bond or make a loan or anything for that purchase. We purchased that out.
Because there was a bond issue that was done in 2003 that gave them $3 million to use for the purpose of purchasing or doing an industrial
Building
park.
industrial parks,
Those
that's
bonds
correct.
were sold in 2003.
And
They
at the
never
time of
had
2003,
used-
they had somewhere picked out, obviously, and then it just didn't
Well,
work
that's when they did the sewer treatment plant
in the south.
in the south side, so they sold bonds for sewer treatment plant and for
I remember.
industrial park, and they sat on the money, and you never actually used any of the money until 2010.
No, they used some of the money when they bought the Jones Park, which ultimately they turned around and resold.
Right.
So they used some of it when they bought the Jones property. Then we used, you're right, we did use that to buy the Dallas Industrial Park, and we also used that
Okay.
to develop the Paul and Commerce Park. So those are essentially the three things that bond.
Well, then this question may come up in the next project,
Yeah.
about where we require the funds, and I guess that's by issuing the bonds.
Well, there's three different places our funds come from. The county gives us some money each year. It's $550,000, which part of that goes to
$225 of it is to pay for the $3 million in bonds.
pay for the bonds, and then the rest comes to us. We did generate a windfall when we sold, and I say we, I was involved in the Industrial Development Authority at that point in time, but when they sold the Jones Farm property, they got a windfall off of that. They sold it for a lot more than what they bought it for, so they put several $1 million in the bank when they did that.
All right, quick question.
Yep.
Is, that wasn't why they bought it? I mean,
It wasn't why they bought
I
it,
mean,
no.
because that would be wrong.
No, they
It
bought
wasn't a
it.
speculative purchase and expected to sell it later.
No, they bought it to try to expand the North Industrial Park, up off of Dallas Hackworth, the North Industrial
Yes.
Park, North Industrial Loop. They bought it to try to expand that. It was adjacent to B&B, down that road. I can't remember the name of that road right now. But, they bought it there, to try to expand that park. And what they found after they went in and spent a whole bunch of money, designing and doing a bunch of other things, was that it was slide fall rock. To the extent.
And they couldn't get a good entrance to 381.
Yeah, they had a lot of problems. That road was a big problem. That road was narrow and windy. It went right past a school, had a 90-degree turn.
But nonetheless, they were able to do this, but they bought it with an intent to make a park out of it.
They did, and they worked on it for a year or so.
Because that would be, you know, we wouldn't want, the taxpayers wouldn't want an entity of the county going out and saying, hey, let's go roll the dice on this piece of property and sell it
Right.
later.
I don't know that the county has ever bought any property, or the industrial building authority has never bought any property with the intent of flipping. And we've got pieces of property here, there, and yonder that we bought because we thought it was a good buy.
Right.
We've got 10 acres off of 278 up near Holseytown Road that we bought just because we thought it was a good buy. It's not that we intend to turn around and sell it for residential. We think we'll use it for industrial at some point in time in the future, but it might be another 5, 10, 15 years. But we have, several different smaller land holdings that we bought over the years because they were good buys. All throughout the 80s and 90s, the Industrial Building Authority couldn't buy any property, one, because they didn't have any money, and two, because the residential was driving the land prices up so high that they couldn't compete. Every piece of property that came on the market ended up being a bidding war, and the IBA couldn't outbid the residential developers. So we have acquired a few pieces over the last 10 years.
Was there any questions about the BLD area, that part of the Dallas Industrial Park?
We do have one company, in there.
We got one tenant in there, that's Haddad, which is a spinoff from the film studio. They're in the film industry.
Well, and then you'll get here as I guess, what, 590,000, is that is that an asset that we're,
What does it say?
It says $590,946.
so do we own it and lease it to them?
No, we don't. We constructed it and sold it to them.
Okay.
That, what you're looking at, the balance sheet, which is dated May 31st, is a little bit confusing because at the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th, we have a financial audit, and we have a financial audit. They will, at that point in time, shift those things
Okay.
around and put them in their permanent location. That was a temporary location for that when we constructed the facility. And then we sold the facility, that then has to be transferred to a different.
All right,
Yeah.
now, another quick question with a short answer.
Yes.
Is that facility, so when Haddad came, did they say, hey, y'all build it, we'll buy it, or did y'all?
Yes.
Okay, so that happens.
Yes.
I mean, they're like, hey, we don't want food, we just want to show up and start bringing our stuff in.
They were out of Pittsburgh, and they had no one here on the ground,
Okay.
so they could not physically, they weren't capable of overseeing the
So
construction.
the IBA has the ability to GC some projects.
We do,
Okay.
yes.
They don't technically GC, they're the owner, and then they turn it sell.
They build it in.
We had a contract to sell them a finished facility.
Okay, so that wasn't a spec building at all?
No, it's not.
All right, awesome.
So this
That's a win.
We've actually never done a spec building.
Is that the building sales here?
Probably is, yes, so it's an offsetting.
Yeah, so at the end of the year, they'll offset
That's
that
right.
income or that account for
That's
the
right.
asset.
Yeah.
So to get the books back.
Yeah, the auditor will do all.
Do you know how
this
many
stuff.
jobs that created, that facility?
I think that they have 6 people there, but that,
It's like a storage facility.
that particular project
He
was
operates out of there
done.
and then leases two spaces to caterers. Everything's to do with the film industry
Yeah.
that they service all across the southeast. That's
They're
their,
always on the road.
Yeah, I've drove through there and saw.
That particular project was done in order to bolster the film industry in Paulding County. It was done to start building that, you know, the other ancillary businesses that you need to support the film studio.
Well, will you jump there next then?
To the film studio? Sure, absolutely.
Well, another
Well, I was
company,
just gonna ask, was there any tax abatements to them?
No.
No.
There were no tax abatements to them.
They didn't bring it up, neither did we.
No, they had a fixed price, so ultimately what we ended up doing was we sold them the facility at a fixed price, which, so we had a fixed budget going into the project. So that was.
well, the other company associated with the film studio is the one from 278, that's all the caterers and air
Harris
conditioners.
University.
Yeah, those guys also.
Now, did they
They
purchase
just
it?
bought that
They just
building.
did.
They just bought it.
They bought that.
he lives in Powder Springs, has a facility in Atlanta, and that's closer to his house, so he moved, opened another facility out there.
He actually lives just right over off of, Martha Road.
All right.
Okay, so the film studio. The film studio, of course, is a different animal than the others. A little bit of history on the film studio. We had a development group that came here and met with us, I guess, in 2011. Does that sound right to you, Tommy?
And then they start.
Was it 10? Yeah, it had to have been 10. because
Yeah.
We issued bonds in 11. So yeah, in 2010, we had a development entity that came here and met with us that wanted to build a film studio in Baldwin County. That's what they wanted to do. However, they had this, this grandiose plan that was rather large. They were going to build multiple studios, multiple buildings, multiple everything, to the tune of $35 million. And they wanted us to issue the bonds for that project. At the end of the day, we weren't comfortable with that. We decided that was, that we weren't going to do that. So we politely told them, thank you, but no thank you. They went about their merry way and we went about ours. A short time period later, their consultant, who had put together their plan and put together their performa and all of that, came back and met with us and said, we realized what those guys wanted to do didn't fit with you guys, mainly because of the scale and the size and everything of it. But would you consider doing something on a smaller scale if we had a business plan that would work for you? So over the course of about 6 months, we met with them multiple different times. We looked at the business plans, we looked at the performance, we looked at everything that was going to take to build a film studio. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we decided to do the project. So the film studio is owned by the Industrial Building Authority. We bought the existing building that was there on that road, 110 Thompson Drive, which was built by Ken Plank. It was built as a flex space building. He built it with the intent of selling each individual unit to private businesses. So you come in, if you wanted 10,000 square feet, you'd buy the first 2 pods. If you wanted 15, you'd buy the first 3 pods, etc. That never did work, I think, mostly because of the timing. He built the building in 2007 and everything went down the toilet. So he ended up losing it to the bank. We bought it from the bank. So we bought the building and the adjacent 7 acres to the building. The building was sitting on 4 acres, and we bought the building and the adjacent 7 acres from the bank. We bought it all at a highly discounted price because it was foreclosed, bank owned, so we got a really good buy on all of that. So the existing building that was there, we did some renovations to it to build out some office space for the studios to use. And the back portion of it, which is still all open, the same as it was when we bought the building, is used what they call mill space. They use it for storage, they use it to construct sets, they use it to house their costumes and all of their props and all that type of stuff. So it worked out really well because we didn't have to do anything to the rest of the building. We did build the 2.
Is those the right figures?
Should be close.
Yes, yes, they are. So we built the two sound stages adjacent to it, which are 20,000 square foot apiece. The two sound stages operate completely independently, so you can have two different shows in filming on the two different stages simultaneously. They don't affect each other. So that's how the facility was constructed. We do have Road Town Enterprises, which is the consultant that I mentioned earlier, that basically manages the facility. Their job, in a nutshell, is to go out and get film production companies to come in and rent the facility and use it. So that is
How
what
do those people pay?
they are paid a base plus commission. Their base is $10,000 a month. Their commission doesn't even kick in until their revenue exceeds $500,000. Once the revenue exceeds $500,000, then their commission kicks in at a pretty low percentage. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but with each increment they go up in revenues, their commission goes up. So if they exceed $750,000 in revenues, their commission goes up a little bit. If they exceed $1 million in revenues, their commission goes up a little bit. So that's the way that is structured.
We're talking about Road Town.
Yeah. And their management contract expires the end of this calendar year. So at the end of this calendar year, we'll make a decision as to whether or not to keep them or not keep them, or whether to do something different.
And we may be going out of the bounds of while we're asking, but just out of curiosity, is, so whether they get anybody in the facility or not, they get a base.
That is correct. Yeah.
Is that, who keeps up the property? The county or?
No, the county doesn't.
IBA.
Yeah, the county really doesn't do anything at all with the facility. It's an IBA-owned facility. We have one permanent employee out there. His name is Jimmy. Jimmy is basically the facility maintenance manager, whatever you want to call him. He takes care of the grounds, he takes care of the buildings. When we have productions that are in shooting in the facility, his job is basically to keep them corralled. Keep them from destroying anything or blowing up anything, or because they get pretty out of hand pretty quick sometimes.
So is Jimmy's and Road Town's expense somewhere else other than?
It is on a film studio. The film studio has its own balance sheet, so it's on the film studio balance sheet. Yes.
It's blended in with that. It's blended
but it's-
in with your
it's broken out
income,
elsewhere.
but you have a separate breakout.
That's correct.
What I gave them was the overall income.
Yeah, well, right, because 1325 is the Atlanta Film Studio funding, so I suppose it's all in that.
It's a little easier to look at on the film studio balance sheet. No secret to anybody, the film studio has lost money the first 2 years that it's been in operation. We are seeing more business now than we've seen in the past, so we're hopeful that it will continue to.
And is it for sale, someone wanting to come and purchase it, obviously they could, I mean, just.
So I want to come purchase the studio?
Yeah.
I'm sure if somebody.
And at some point with IBA have the ability, if someone says, hey, y'all got whatever, how many millions in it, we're gonna offer you 3. I mean, could the IBA make that decision as to like, look, let's just cut our losses?
We could, but we had so much equity in the existing building that we bought, and so much equity in the property that we bought. I don't think we'll ever be upside down on it, because
Okay.
we had so much equity when we bought it.
When the
That
market-
was
when the
part-
market returns.
Yeah, that was part of the justification behind building the thing, is we bought that existing building at about 40% of what it cost to build it. And we bought the adjacent 70%.
Well, I mean, I don't think any of us are crazy enough to believe that every venture is gonna be this great windfall and huge success. That
Right.
There's also always associated with,
Right.
so, and part of me just going through here is just to kind of determine, and one of the questions is gonna be just briefly, is to go back, to count the wins, the ones that, hey man, that was a home run, that the IBA did. And something like this one is like, hey, it's gonna take time.
Yeah. And the film studio is a different animal than the manufacturing facility, because when a production comes in, they may have 200 people there for a month and a half, and then they're gone, and then there's nobody there. So it's a very different animal. But what they do, which is different from any other type of business, is when they come in with a $15 million budget, they spend a big chunk of that money locally. I mean, they spend it at Home Depot, they spend it at Office Max, they spend it at Starbucks, and they spend it at the hotels, and they spend it all over the place. So they really infuse the economy with cash when they come in. They don't create a whole bunch of permanent jobs. They create the jobs while they're there, and then, of course, when they leave, the jobs leave.
Well, I mean, you know, hindsight's 20/20, but in retrospect, we may not have considered a film studio.
Maybe not, but I think it's too early to say that.
So have y'all made long-range projections? So what you're telling us is the fixed assets of the building and the property is a lot more valuable than what you got in it when you're saying you're not upside down, right?
Right, yeah, we're fine with the facilities. The facilities, you know, we've got less in it than what they're worth. Yeah. The operation of the studio is losing money.
The pro forma was that if they leased it at 65%, it would pay its expenses and its debt.
So a group comes in and they pitch the IBA on this idea, and then it goes from there, I mean, basically.
Correct. Okay.
And then the bond, or the money, how was the money?
That was bond, yes. The 2011 bond, which included 3 projects. It included the money for the film studio, it included money for the hangar that we're building at the airport, and it included money for the water tank that we built at the airport.
And that total cost of the bond was how much?
$8 million.
8 million? And y'all did all 3 projects for 8 million?
All right, and the process of a bond.
Yes.
All right, let's just discuss that briefly.
Okay, process of a bond. Bonds that are issued by the Industrial Building Authority have to be backed by the Board of Commissioners because we do not have taxing ability. And pretty much all bonds, pretty much no matter what type they are, have to have some sort of taxing entity that backs that bond.
That's the security.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So there are some entities out there that have the ability to issue them on their own based on their revenues. For example, Hartsville. I hate to use Hartsville as an example for anything, but Hartsville has enough revenue income that they can back their own bonds because of their revenues. But you're not ever going to find an economic development organization or an industrial building authority or anything like that, which is going to have revenue streams sufficient enough to float their own bonds. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Now, the Port Authority, for example, they have enough revenues, Port of Savannah, to float their own bonds. But they're for all practical purposes a business.
Mhm.
They're not out buying and developing land, they're running.
So the IBA gets together and says, hey, we're gonna need $X million for this film studio, we're gonna need to do this for the water tower. And what was the other thing?
The hangar.
And the hangar. It says, all right, now we're going to issue a bond.
That's correct.
And does it have to be voted on?
It's got to be voted on by the Industrial Building Authority, it has to be voted on by the Board of Commissioners, it has to be voted on by both entities.
Okay, then there's some lending group.
That's correct.
That doesn't really care about the real estate.
That's
They're
correct.
backed by the signature of the county.
Pretty much.
Okay.
And we have done, we've done some bonds specifically for the county. The bond that we did most recently for the fixing the subdivision streets. Industrial Building Authority issued that bond for the county, not on behalf of it, but for the county. So we've done in the South Plant, South Street Plant.
Well, that's good
It's
that
not
you
an
bring that
Industrial
up,
Building
yeah.
Authority project,
That's good.
that was a county project that they came to us and asked us to look at bonding it.
Yeah, because they couldn't do it.
Water authority couldn't do it.
Yes, the water authority
Based
couldn't
on
do it.
their revenues, they could not do it.
Okay.
That's correct. So,
We talking about the water tank?
no, we're talking about the
The
sewer.
there's the sewer plant,
Okay.
yeah.
But the water tank likewise is,
That's the one in the south, right? The one that says,
The water, what you see as water tank is actually water
Is that-
tank for the industrial park.
right.
Yeah.
Tell us
And
what
the
that
hangar.
water tank, what benefit is a water tank? What does that do for us?
What the water tank does is it provides the fire suppression for the hangars at the airport, and it will provide the fire suppression for the airport technology park, which is the other industrial park, which is the Industrial Building Authority that we're developing, which we haven't yet talked about. That's the third industrial park that the Industrial Building Authority it's the
It's called
airport.
Airport Industrial Park, very first one under our example.
So the water tank, in essence, is, I mean, eventually it will become a county asset, because the Industrial Building Authority is not gonna own and operate a water tank. But there was not enough water service at the airport to provide this fire suppression. There was not enough justification for the county to come out and build a water tank or upgrade that water network to provide enough water service flow. So for the Industrial Building Authority to be able to do the Airport Technology Park, they had to build a tank.
Now, let me ask you a real quick question, is, now for the county to issue a bond, now that's a different animal altogether, right?
Different animal altogether.
Okay, different folks vote on that.
Well, of course, the Board of Commissioners vote on it, but it doesn't come to the Industrial Building Authority.
You talking about just for the county to issue a bond? Yeah.
Right.
But it's the same procedure as when we back their bonds, unless it is not allowed by law, unless it
Right.
requires a vote of citizens.
Gotcha, okay. All right.
Okay, so the Airport Technology Park is 120 acres. It butts up against the airport. It's to the north side of the airport. It is property that was originally acquired as part of the airport. We purchased a 500-acre tract of property when we built the airport that was owned by Consolidated Land Development, which is a development entity out in Texas. And this is a remnant, basically a remnant of that 500 acres. It's not needed for airport. It doesn't work for airport because you can't get in it. The way the property is situated, the topography and the and location of the property, you can't use it for the airport. So if you can't use it for the airport, the next logical thing to do is transfer it to the Industrial Building Authority and let them develop it as an industrial park that supports the airport. So
Which is, are all the hangars out there, there would be on the industrial, or is any of that airport property? Like any of the T hangars or the hangars that are out there now?
All that's airport.
All that is airport?
Yes, all that is airport.
Okay, but has the IBA built any of that?
The IBA is building the big box hangar, the big one that you see out there. They're building that right now.
On airport
On
property?
airport property, yeah.
Okay.
That project was originally a joint development project between our FBO and the Industrial Building Authority. That project started that way, as a joint development between the two entities, basically a public-private partnership, for lack of a better term. The previous owner of our FBO went into some financial trouble and ended up leaving the FBO, no longer owns it. The new owner of the FBO came in and for a whole host of different reasons didn't want to do that deal the way it was previously set up. So because of the previous owner of the FBO leaving and basically going financially defunct, and the new ownership, we dissolved that partnership, and the Industrial Building Authority continued with the construction of the hangar on their own. So the Industrial Building Authority at this point in time has no partner on the hangar. It is completely theirs.
Okay, and are there any tenants, potential tenants, or?
I hate that question. We had a tenant that we were negotiating the lease with, and 2 weeks ago, they were bought out by a company out of Houston, Texas, and new owners have told us they don't know if they're gonna keep the company here or move the company to Texas, or what they're gonna do with it. So now we're back to square one. We've got to put out another request for proposal on the hangar and try to find some tenant. So we do have 2 companies that are interested, so hopefully one of those will.
Now, part of it says that no building acquired shall be operated by the authority, but shall be leased or sold to one or more persons, firms, or corporations. So how does that work at that hangar?
Well, we don't have any intention to operate.
It's a spec building.
Yeah, the intention is that we're gonna lease it to somebody. That was the intent from day one. We never intended to operate that building at all.
How do y'all do that with the film studio?
With the film studio, we lease it to whoever's gonna do a film, whoever's
But
gonna.
in the meantime, y'all do, it's,
In the meantime, it sits there. I mean, there's no production going on. There's no.
but y'all do
Seems like you're managing it.
They're managing it, I guess, because you've got somebody out there.
They're not managing.
Well, we have a management entity, the Railroad Town Enterprises is
Okay, so it's-
managing it.
Manage empty buildings when there's nobody leasing.
I was
So there's no
confused.
business there.
So,
Yeah.
because you said you had somebody,
It-
Jamie.
It's like if we were to build a spec building, and before somebody moves into the spec building, we're gonna own the building.
I got you.
It's not
Right,
doing
maintain it.
anything, it's just sitting there and we maintain it. So it's like we've got a spec building and somebody leases it and they do their thing and then they're gone and then we got a
Lease
spec building
expires.
again.
I got you.
Okay, right.
So is there anything going on the 120 acres? Is it being graded? Is it been?
The only thing going on 120 acres is, we had a federal grant that we had gone out and acquired to put the road access into the airport technology park. Because right now, there's no road access to it, you can't get to it except four-wheeler.
And is that the property behind the hangar, between the hangar and 278?
It's the property, if you came in the airport parkway, when you get to the end of the airport parkway and you
Straight.
take a sharp right, it's straight ahead.
Okay.
That's right. You gotta go over that ridge and down the other side. to-
Grants to take out that hill and fill in the hole
Right.
and create.
Okay.
Now, that grant's being managed by the county DOT because it's a roadway project. So ultimately, when the road is built, the road will be county road like any other county
At
road.
no cost? Because it's a grant?
Because it's a grant.
Right.
But it's a federal grant.
That's correct. So it has strings attached to
I
it.
guess.
So, what other public infrastructure does it need?
It's gonna have to have water. Sewer's already there. City of Dallas brought the sewer from their plant. So the sewer is there. The water lines will have to be extended down, but of course, the water tank is there for the fire suppression, so the fire suppression is available. But, typical infrastructure, like bring fiber down there. But the Northwest Georgia Regional Fiber Network comes all the way into the airport, so they'll be able to extend that fiber network down into the industrial park, and they will have the same quality of fiber that we've got, in other parts of the county.
That was done last year.
What's that?
That was done last year.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so those are the three parks that we've got. We do own other tracts of property that are spread out all over the county. We've got 11 acres over at the corner of Nebo and Bill Cruz Parkway. We still have land over in North Industrial Park on North Industrial Drive. As I mentioned earlier, we've got land over in Holsey Town in 278. Trying to think of what other parcels we've got kind of.
Don't trade with the Macklin Road. right?
Yeah, we no longer have any ownership in the Macklin Road. That was a property that we bought for the intent of placing industrial there. However, due to folks in the adjacent subdivision raising a ruckus about the location of that, we ended up trading that property. And worked out well, I guess. We ended up trading it for additional property that butts up against the Dallas Industrial Park. So we're able to expand the Dallas Industrial Park and do away with the property on Old Mill Road, Macklin. That was a bit of a pain for us.
All right.
Of course, the other part, of course, when they sold the Jones property, the money that they got, the focus of the IBA up until 2009 was building an airport.
Building an
And
airport.
all of their
That's correct.
resources were poured into that airport,
That's correct.
which had,
When the airport was proposed in 1998, there was a bond referendum on the ballot to float bonds to get the money to buy the land to build the airport. The FAA will pay for the construction of the airport, but they will not pay for the additional land cost. So you have to pay for the additional land cost up front. Then they will pay for the construction of your airport, and then after the construction's done, they will give you your money back on the land development, or on the land cost. But they will not pay for that land up front. And the reason is because somewhere in the country at some point in time, they bought land for an airport, and somebody didn't go forward and build it. And they got stuck with a whole bunch of land they didn't want and didn't need. So in 1998, they had the bond referendum. It failed miserably. So the county did not have a way to pay for the land. The FAA was willing to build the airport, but they didn't have a way to pay for the land. So in 2004, the Industrial Building Authority sold the Jones Farm Industrial Park property. As I said, they got a windfall. I don't remember exactly what they got for it, but it was a lot of money they got for it. They turned around and did a partnership with the airport authority. So the industrial building authority spent $4.5 million and bought the land where the airport was to go. Since then, they've gotten reimbursed by the FAA. They're reimbursed after FAA finished construction, paying for the construction of the airport. They did refund the money. So the industrial building authority has gotten their money back. Now, they have turned around and made 2 additional loans to the airport since then. I made a loan of $1 million recently on the taxiway widening project. And prior to that, they had made a $1 million loan to the airport authority to pay for environmental mitigation credits for the expansion area that's adjacent to the airport technology park. It's airport property and it's going to be developed for airport, but it's adjacent to the property the industrial building authority owns. So the philosophy there is that the IBA wanted the airport to go ahead and develop that piece of property because it butts up against what they own. So it immediately increases the value of the industrial building authority's property. It makes it easier for the industrial building authority to develop and sell their property. So, and that money, and both of those will be refunded back to the industrial building authority as either the bonds are issued or the FAA pays for.
All right, well, let me ask you then, where did the IBA get the $1 million to loan to the airport?
When the $4.5 million was refunded back from FAA to the IBA,
Did it not pay off another bond?
They got the money from the windfall.
Oh, from the
that was from
Okay.
the
That was
Jones
Okay.
industrial park property.
All right, so there's
Yes.
no bond associated with that loan from the,
No.
For the
We
taxiway.
couldn't do that, that would be illegal.
okay, all right, well, I just want to make that clear, is that
Yeah.
that wasn't done.
No, bond money is extremely restricted, extremely restricted. So the bond money stays, that's why it sits in completely different bank accounts. We don't even put bond money in our regular bank accounts. It stays in its own bank account.
Okay, so obviously, hey, we got some cash,
Mhm.
and we'll do it that way.
That's correct.
All right.
That's good.
I have a question for either two commissioners here. Through y'all's term of being commissioners and dealing with the IBA, economic development, and the airport authority, all the things y'all looked at, and I know your hearts is creating good economic development in our county. Everything that was proposed, has it met y'all's expectations of what y'all thought it was gonna do, or y'all have an overall statement you want to tell us, like, well, it did about half of what we thought it was gonna do, or as far as jobs, creating jobs and things like that? Have y'all,
As far as the film studio, Todd and myself, we did vote against it. We had been in office, I think,
1 month.
Not long.
1 month.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we really weren't up to speed on the film studio. I mean, like I said, we've been sitting there with chairs a month,
yeah.
so.
But, I mean, overall, your term of office, both of y'all, Tommy, you've been in a while too, and have y'all thought that it did a good job in creating jobs? Was the money well spent? That was what we've done?
The IBA operates like government, slow as Christmas.
Yeah. It wasn't fast
Right.
enough for you, huh?
No, they don't, because government don't move that way.
Yeah.
Far as the film studio, it's a good concept, but if it had to do it over again, wouldn't do it that way. IBA doesn't have any business contracting with Roadtown doing it. You learn things the hard way, they wouldn't do it. Again, the concept's good, but you would want a public-private partnership where somebody else actually.
Yeah, bears the burden of that expense, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, it's two different animals, because the IBA actually operating the business doesn't work, because the IBA operates like a government, and government can't respond what it needs to, it just don't work that way.
But the other projects that we discussed, I mean, the other industrial parks, the airport parks.
Slow as Christmas.
Well, yeah, before
I
things
mean,
happen.
the
But is it a good
decommissioning-
investment?
Well, as far as businesses go, it is a tough process because you're competing against every other county, other states. As a prime example, Mohawk, we being in the Marco industry, they were looking at building a new plant. Yes, I did talk to them. When I first came, I'd heard about it. Went and talked to them, but they went to South Georgia. You think, why wouldn't they stay in Dalton? But he's in with the stream of South Georgia, it's caused the tax abatements, and the labor was cheaper, because our employment was so high down that way. And cause your per capita, what people make in those areas where they win, is about 120 people what they hire. But you're probably looking at
$10 an hour job.
But now, that being said, if the IBA didn't own any property, it wouldn't have anything to offer at all.
Well,
Yeah, we have
and,
nothing.
and keep that in mind,
Right.
when I took the IBA over, when I started working for them in 2006, zero land inventory, nothing. No park, no land, no nothing.
You can never go talk to anybody.
Right, then no prospect
Yeah,
came to
you
Polk
couldn't,
County.
that's right.
Right.
We had
We
absolutely
had nothing to
nothing.
offer, yeah.
Right, so now we do have some, but also we've been through the worst, I mean, the last 8
Yes.
years have
Yes.
been, you know, the worst of our lifetimes.
Not very conducive.
Well, does anybody have any more questions for Blake? I mean, you got anything else you want to volunteer, or?
A couple of things. You know, the makeup of the Industrial Building Authority was set by the state constitution back in 1962. The makeup of the Airport Authority was set by the legislature in 1972, 10 years later. And, you know, obviously there's been a lot of discussion about how these boards overlap. And I don't know what was going on in 1972, I was 3 years old. But I suspect that what they did in 1972 was, you know, the purpose, I think everybody's aware of this, the purpose of creating the Airport Authority in 1972 was to stop the city of Atlanta from building their second airport out there. So, you know, when they put that board in place, I think they just did what was the easiest thing to do. What was the easiest thing to do? Well, we got an IBA, we'll just take that IBA board and add these couple of other seats to it, and, you know, that'll work for now. And that was, you know, 40 years ago. So, you know, some of these things weren't thought out real well in 1962 and 1972. That paragraph 5 that you alluded to, which talks about mills and shops and things like that.
Yeah, it needs to be, it's limited.
It doesn't apply
I agree.
in 2014. I mean, the types of projects that we're seeing these days, you know, we do have some manufacturing, but it's very high-tech manufacturing, and, you know, the other things that we're looking at are, you know, data centers and things like that, which none of it fits into those categories. You know, that language in there is so limiting that it technically doesn't allow us to develop an industrial park. It only allows us to build a building. So if we don't have industrial parks, then we can't build buildings. So there's things that we have to do, and the argument's been made over the years by attorney after attorney after attorney that in order to build the building, you have to build the industrial park. In order to build the industrial park, you have to put in the sewer lines. In order to build the sewer lines, you have to put in the roads, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we've gotten to the point where we are today of, you know, we're basically a full-blown development entity doing industrial parks and industrial projects and buildings. We wouldn't have to do anywhere near what we do if there was private groups and private entities out there that were willing to come into Paulding County and do industrial, but there are none, and there haven't been any. And I don't see anyone standing on the sidelines going, you know, we'd like to do that if y'all weren't doing it. So what we're doing is absolutely necessary. There's no way around it.
If the economy got better, you don't think private enterprise might come in and do what you're doing?
Nobody did before.
Yeah, and that-
Even
The price of the land was driven
Because
by
the residential?
residential, and it was not affordable for them to.
There's too much money to be made in residential, and it was so much easier to do residential. You build a spec house for $100,000. You build a spec building for $3 million. I mean, what makes more sense if you're the guy putting
We
the money?
don't have as much on the line.
And your return on your investment
Yeah,
is a lot less.
and you get a
than
lot
industrial
quicker, too.
would be.
And every house that's built residential doesn't pay for itself for its county. County has to provide more services to that home than it
It's
does.
a $242,000 house.
All right, well, let me ask y'all this, and I think it's a fair question, is, one of the things we have to address is who sits on the authority.
Mhm.
And it sounds like y'all may have an opinion. And
Who's, on this authority?
on the IBA.
On the IBA,
The question is the authority membership properly appointed?
you can't change it. It's set out by the Constitution.
Well, that's what we're talking about doing.
But what, that can be changed, can it?
You can't
Go to
change.
General
who-
Assembly.
You can't, no, they can't change who sits on that authority. See, this
So,
is,
so
this
it's forever and
is,
ever, it's gonna be the mayor of the city of Dallas and the mayor of Hiram, and it's gonna be these people.
It would take a constitutional
it would
amendment
take a
to change.
constitutional amendment to
It can be
change.
done, but it's a long, tedious process.
You can't change who sits on it without changing the Constitution.
The airport authority is different. The airport authority is a statutory entity. They can change that next January, they can change
Well, because I think that's part of the overlapping issue,
it. It is.
is, so, if that's not an issue that we can address, then we don't need to
Other
spend
than
all our time talking about it.
operationally, see, that's,
Well, yeah, I mean, we can decide what limits they have, or what
no,
abilities they have.
operationally, right now, you have an airport executive director that serves as executive director of the IBA.
Yeah, I got you.
And
You can do that.
part of, I guess, my frustration is when that animal was created, the whole focus was the airport. In 2009, there became a whole nother set of focus, so
So,
Which,
basically, we're
if
looking
you,
at.
if you look at this balance sheet, the majority of all their cash that they had is put into an airport. It's all in the airport.
Yeah, I follow.
So,
And it's,
that's part, I mean, is their job an airport, or is their job an IBA? We didn't change that when we said, y'all need to go do these things. We took the structure that was there, which was, they were both so blended that you can't tell the balance sheets apart. For instance, the hangar
and the
is
tax
built,
rate.
huh?
No, it's on the IBA sheet.
No, it ain't on nowhere.
It's nowhere?
It's nowhere.
You talking about the terminal?
The terminal. The
Not the
terminal is nowhere. Because the terminal was built, cost a little over $4 million to build, $3 million with a state
Yeah,
grant, $1 million the IBA paid. They built it on FAA property, so they actually have a lease on the facility for 20 years, because they can't technically own it. So it's carried on their books as $1 million due from the airport.
So it's
And
this should be that should be
Well,
totally
now-
separate.
The terminal was built though with, from the governor.
The three names.
Yeah, three men of it.
$3 million, the other $1 million was built by the IBA.
Okay.
So it's on
So
their
where-
books
so
as
where's
a
this-
loan.
So where's this $4 million asset or five or whatever
It
it
ain't
is?
on new books.
Books. Didn't I ask you that question the other
And
day?
I said, it's IBA's, and I confirmed it on the way here, that it ain't on new books.
Books.
Cause I looked on the,
Yeah, that was
Remember,
one of the questions
we were
had.
talking about we couldn't find
it's
the
on,
terminal building.
because, and the reason it's not is, yes, they use their $1 million, they book it as a loan, but they have a lease for the property, so their attorneys and accountants determined that is not a fixed
Well-
asset. So that $1 million
It's just a
is
leasehold,
up to
and it's
about
They've
not-
that.
got it
Asset.
listed as a current asset here.
So, and that's a legitimate claim, is that
That's it, right here.
the cash is at the airport.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
$3 million.
so,
That's the tax.
They have $3 million invested in the airport right now.
so how is that, how do you disseminate between the two? I mean, how do you make it clear that that doesn't happen?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, that's
So
gonna
it's
be.
accounted for, it's just.
Well,
That's what it's gonna be.
I see what you're saying, and what you're trying to say is the members that are on the IBA and the airport authority ought to be separate. They should overlap.
Members and the executive
Executives.
director.
Should-
They're run by the same
Creating-
person.
Possibly creating a
Separate.
two separate jobs for those, one as an industrial building authority and one for the airport.
And let me ask you this, now, when you say the mayor, you're not talking about the who it consists of, who the IBA consists
No,
of?
you can't change that.
Are the airport authority, is it?
No,
You
you
change
change
airport
that.
authority.
Change airport.
You can't,
But you're
the
mostly talking about the management.
operation of the airport.
Okay, not so much who is on the authority as the
Because
management.
see, you remember the way that Heath and I.
Yeah, we're
had
talking
this-
about you.
We've had this conversation
Yeah, that's
for
fine, I
years.
know. Let's-
Okay, but, see, it got changed during the same thing that created the airport authority, or reconstituted it and blended it. Prior to that, the IBA was operated by the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
They were one and the same.
Well, Skip
And
was
that's
the last
what the
one.
money that you paid, well, when all that split occurred, that's when the previous administration decided that the airport department person would serve as the IBA director too.
I remember remnants of that discussion in 1980 when I was on the board of directors of the chamber.
So part of, I mean, you know, in here, our recommendation, if we see so fit, would be that that does not happen, that the management,
If there's some way of separating.
Yeah,
right,
I don't think they should be on both boards.
or manage both boards, I would say, I mean, both should not be paying the same person to do both jobs.
Correct.
Just don't forget my bio.
Well, man, that makes this, you know, harder.
Yeah.
And to explain why those members are who they are is those are whose taxes that the IBA is abating. City of Dallas, City of Highland, and Paulding County. That's why,
And board education.
and Board of Education, which they don't technically have any representation on there, but that's,
And most of it's that money.
majority of all taxes you pay to the Board
60%.
of Education.
Now.
So that's a subliminal way of saying maybe someone with the education.
But you
should-
can't change that.
Yeah, but I mean, granted, we
Should've
keep
been.
we keep Cliff in the loop, and we're very cognizant.
Because they can sue to object to
They
a
can.
deal,
They can.
that's what the Board of Education in Cobb County did over the Brave
Right.
Stadium.
Right. But that's why we typically only abate projects that go on our property, because if it's our property, then we're not paying taxes on it anyways. Nobody's getting any taxes on what the IBA owns, we don't pay taxes.
Taxes, yeah.
All right,
So we're taking a piece of property that is paying nothing, and we're abating it for some period of time, and at the end of that time,
It will
it's
pay
supposed to
something.
be paid, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right, well, D4 is the one that says, to have and exercise usual powers, private corporations as a private corporation, except such as are inconsistent with this amendment, including the power to appoint our officers, agents, and employees, and provide the compensation duties, which officers, which agents may be members of the authority. So it sounds to me that that is a paragraph that we need to discuss.
Well, but now you recognize that you don't have to change that legislation. The Board of Commissioners, what I just described, the Board of Commissioners can have a vote and change all that. You don't need legislation to change that.
Well, I thought it had to be a constitutional,
No,
but
but
General
Not on this
Assembly.
air, not on the airport.
Not on the airport.
no, you're talking about how do they
How's this
operate
change?
now? All right, the Board of Commissioners funds the IDA.
well, I know, which says they do as I say, or guess what? Yeah, I mean, we know how that works.
That's right. So you don't have to change what I just talked about. You don't have to have legislation to separate the operation of those two entities. Because the airport department, the airport authority's employee is not an employee of the airport authority. They're an employee of the
County?
because the person that's the executive director of the airport authority is the department head of the Paulding County Airport Department.
Well, something's gotta change somewhere.
I agree. So that's how they can change. I mean, it can be changed without legislation.
But it's at the whim of the sitting commissioners.
To change that is the board because that involves money.
Is that clear as mud to you guys?
I'm saying it's that confusing. It really is.
Well, the commissioner is on, the chairman, the chairman is on the board by legislation. But he gets to appoint two more people.
No, he don't. Board of Commissioners do.
As a whole?
As a
Yes,
whole.
As a whole.
Okay.
And see, and that's where, if you read that, that's where it raises into question. It does not say at the chairman, and the reason it doesn't say the chairman, at the time that constitutional amendment
There was.
was
just
written,
one.
there wasn't even a commissioner.
Oh, really?
No, it was an ordinary.
Yeah.
Read that, because
Yeah.
the way
But
I
it just
misunderstood-
says the governing body.
It says the authority shall consist of 6 members as follows: the mayor of Dallas, the mayor of Hiram, the president of the chamber, the governing head of Paulding County, and 2 members which shall
And
be
it-
appointed by the
and that
governing
was-
head.
Created.
The
by
governing
The
head.
ordinary
head, that's the
commissioner,
county
roads and
commissioner,
revenues,
and the
and
head
probate
board.
judge.
Well, I read that
Yeah.
as the county commissioner. He's the
Yeah.
governing head, isn't
Well, I
No,
do
the
too,
Board
but I
of
think it'd be an
Commissioners is
argument.
the
that it's
governing
a
head.
commissioner.
They're the governing body. I don't know.
he? What's the difference? That's terminology of governing head.
Because
Yeah.
now the attorneys split hairs.
Well, I
it
know
says
is
the
the
governor
committee-
has a member.
Chairman comes to work every day and sits in that office, y'all do not.
That's true.
The governing head, to me, is the chairman of the commission.
But his authority comes, so he only has limited authority what he can do. Now, what they've always practiced is the chairman sits on those two boards, but the board of commissioners appoints those two people.
Those two people, that's what I've been doing.
That's the way it's been practiced as long as there's been commissioners.
Well, it'd be a lot easier just to say that D4 would say, but this shall not include anyone that sits on the airport authority or yada yada down that line, as opposed to whatever this angle is that we're looking at.
Well, I tell you what, I agree with the way it works, because I think the majority of the commissioners, if that's the way it's been handled, the chairman and the rest of the board,
Appoint two.
they appoint people. The chairman is appointed by everybody in the whole county, gets to vote on that person. He's got a mandate by being elected, and the rest of the commissioners in their districts get voted, so they get to choose, get to vote on it. I don't think that should be changed. I think they should have who they want in it. They are in charge. They have to run the county government. Whether it's these people in the board now or whoever gets elected later. That's what, I agree with what it says.
Well, and I personally do not have an issue with that either. But mine is with them overlapping one to the other.
I do, yeah, I don't think.
And that's why I'm having trouble being able to completely separate them.
But what
You know.
the airport authority does is basically outside the scope of this committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can go over and talk to some of them and see if we can have some.
But see, the interlocking business that the IBA has done with the airport has restricted its ability.
Okay, well, how do you restrict that interlocking ability, I guess is what we're looking at.
Well, the
I mean, how-
commissioners can do that. They don't have to appoint somebody.
How do you
No,
keep the
they
authority,
can't.
how do you keep the IBA from having the ability to say, here you go, airport authority, here's $1 million, pay me back later?
Is the airport authority, is their member, or their members set up the same way? I mean, is it kind of?
Their members are the IBA board members plus 3 other citizens appointed by the board of commissioners.
So you got the same group of people running everything at every level, and that's not right. You got, it's inbreeding, guys. You don't do that. You need some autonomy on these boards. If the final vote has to be held by the commissioners, which it should, because they are controlling the money, but
Well,
somebody
again,
else
we
should
don't get a
be,
vote. Just remember, we don't get a vote to give away the money.
well, y'all have to approve the bonds,
Well, that's a bond, but that's not, we don't get a vote on tax.
but you're
rebate.
funding them.
But
So you do have control over them because
Yeah,
the
so
money's
we're not
coming
gonna
from you.
pass the bond, right? We think the
But
bond's
you got the
paid
same
instead.
people that are doing, controlling the money, that's serving on the boards, they're running the things, and it should be,
Well,
different
let me just say,
levels.
I'd like to say this as well. I personally think that the intent of the IBA is, for me, I'm speaking for myself, is being followed. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that as far as I'm concerned, the projects that we speak of, including the studio, I think had the intent of performing, producing jobs, producing income, producing whatever for the county. I have no doubt that was correct. Now, where do we go from there, you know, and do we want to limit it? Do we want to, you know, if all of a sudden we've kind of fallen on, well, we got the IBA really acting as putting all their eggs in the airport basket. I mean, is that what we're talking about? Is that the one thing that we want to discuss?
Well, is that number 4 on the agenda?
Well, that airport is probably the single largest investment
I wanted to ask that
in the
question.
county, recently.
I think you're short-sighted. If you put all your eggs in airport authority in that airport, you're gonna miss
Well, I agree.
tons of jobs.
Yeah.
And I agree.
Because you've had more success, because the airport is such a longer-term thing, but you've had more success bringing other industry here when you actually actively had somebody selling
I
polycat.
think that it goes along with what the IBA was established for, and that the IBA should have some involvement with it. I mean, there's a major investment. And most of the money, you know, came from outside the county, but, I mean, we made
The county the Paulding County has roughly $6 million in it.
Out of 42 or whatever it is.
Out of 50 something. It actually costs the county $350+ thousand a year to operate the airport.
How much?
$350-something thousand a year to operate the airport.
Okay, so it's a.
But you're gonna have that same problem again for a project, not the airport, and I'm not opposed to the airport, but this could come up again because you've got the same people all together saying that this is what we're gonna do, what's to keep you from coming up with another project down the road. And as long as you've got the same board members on everyone, they're all gonna say, well, let's all do this again, and we're gonna end up in the same situation where we're at.
And I agree with Peggy that it doesn't need to be, the airport needs to succeed, but not at the expense of the IBA.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately, they gotta be, because all of the IBA's energies for, well, since 2000, all the IBA's energies, they didn't attract any new industry in Paulding County.
But now that's made a turn.
It's made a turn, but you're the IBA's at a juncture that they're asset rich and cash poor.
Yeah, when we know how that is, that's not good, yeah.
Yeah, and where is their cash? Their cash is sitting in.
Well, that's the reason I was asking about like selling something.
Hmm.
You know, that's the reason I was at selling something, you know, if there was something that we could, if we had something we could sell, that somebody
the
wanted
movie
to buy.
studio by the end of the year. If they choose, I mean.
Well, let's go back, out number 4 on the
But
agenda.
that's not to us, I mean, that's not our discussion.
How much debt can the IBA incur as far as debt-wise, or
Whatever the
Kim
county
can
can
do
do.
the back? Yeah, what we got?
Yeah.
You talking about
What's
the
the county
millage
worth?
rate? You got it down. I wanna know if this is what's the revenue for the county? How many?
Guys, in about
50,
10 minutes, I'm gonna call.
Based on a meal.
Okay.
A meal generates $3,200,000 right now. $3,246,000 and 76.
You already know those numbers.
Here, I'll make one. This is what you're allowed by law and what's already committed.
You already
As
explained.
far as economic development, let's just say that Enroll, which Enroll didn't, but a company like Enroll said, look, we want you to build us a building. Cadillac Products, they located here, county sold the bonds, abated a certain amount of taxes, but they used it as their financing on it. All right, that's what these things are. What you've already, the maximum, what's committed is $1,362,000 per year is not that you're paying it, but that's what's used towards your allocation. Okay? You've got, they keep 20% reserve, so you could allocate another $1,235,000 a year in debt service.
That's just, all right, that's just paying the interest
Principal and interest.
on a
In
bond.
other
You
words,
gotta pay-
if the IBA said XYZ, XYZ company comes in and says, look, we wanna come here, we'll generate 400 jobs, and we want this, and we want you to issue industrial revenue bonds for $25 million. That's what this is for.
What's that number look like in dollars? We see what we can service, but what is that number that can be serviced?
What can be serviced or what's owed?
Well, both. What's open currently?
What's owed currently that's applied to those things? I think I got a copy of that. In here somewhere. Well, it's the water tank and the, water tank film studio, which is $6.2 million.
In the hangar?
Well, no, excuse me, it's water tank, the hangar,
Hangar,
and the film
film studio.
studio, which is roughly $7 to $8 million. It's the $3 million that's on the original loan, and what's the other one?
And when you say a 10-year note, does that mean it's gonna be paid off in 10 years?
Yes. And then that's the infrastructure task force bonds, which was a $4.5 million set of bonds. So you're looking at $12 to $13 million is what's the issue.
So say 13 million currently. And that is, so what are we paying on that annually? Where is that in these numbers?
That's what it is, you're paying $1,362,000 a year. That's literally what
Okay,
you're,
that's-
that
that's
is
what
what you're paying on
Okay.
what's borrowed.
And that's
So your
what's,
question is,
that's what's
why not
available.
12 million?
So another,
No, that's what's available.
1.2.
well, we're paying more than 1.2.
Right.
I know, because you have the capacity to do that much.
Total capacity is about 25 million.
All right, that's what I'm asking. All right. So we're debt servicing half of what we do.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I can tell you, being here 50 years in the county, in these last 8 years or so, I think the county has progressed in a positive light than it has any time that I've been here, as far as bringing things to the county for jobs and different things. And it couldn't have happened without the IBA. Now,
All right, and I'm,
I'm
with you on that.
But I can understand that it seemed like the airport's kind of hijacked a lot of the efforts of the IBA.
well, or maybe, potential,
Yeah.
because, well, we're just cash poor. And now, having said that, does that mean that at some point, we're not gonna have enough cash to service some of what we have outstanding?
Now,
No, that's not, I don't believe that.
yeah, IBA's not.
Yeah.
Well, I know the IBA's
Well, I
not.
mean, Tommy.
But now, that doesn't mean that the citizens are paying, are being taxed to pay this $1,362,000. The IBA has been paying that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they get a certain amount of money to do some of them, the 255, we give them that.
I was gonna say, man, it's just, this thing's making a circle here.
What you were saying is annually they get funded 550 with.
Which 255 of it is to pay the first line out of it.
Right.
The others, they paid out of their cash reserves or whatever they had from the windfall of the Jones property or wherever
The
it is.
IBA has.
But the IBA is sitting at a point that if they don't get the $1 million loan that they made to the airport authority
They're gonna be out
for,
of cash to service these others.
then the county will have to pay, the county will actually have to pay the debt service payments due on the film studio and the hangar,
All right, and when
and
does-
possibly the water tank,
All right, and,
right?
Yes.
and what's
The only thing Tommy and I disagree on is he says that it's because they put so much money in the
Well-
airport, and
The film studio lost, and it sucked money out, but you would have the $1 million if it was not for the last loan, because that's what you said, if you get paid back, you can make that payment.
all right, hey, what's, and if things don't change, how far out is that?
2 months.
Well, I'll be
Well, now,
asking,
you may have the cash to pay it. It's close on this one, but you'll have nothing left.
Okay.
that's correct.
but that's not unusual, is it? With the
Yes.
other, has the IBA always produced enough income through what it does to pay these bond notes? Has the county ever had, besides what the county gives them anyway?
No, the county's never had to pay a bond note for the IBA.
But what would
Besides
happen,
the $3 million that they originally approved.
yeah, but what would happen is that 255 would have to change to another number,
Right,
you know, that's, so it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
yeah. But it's gotta come out of the county's budget in
Yeah.
order to do that.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so, as a matter of discussion at our next meeting, before we go to setting next meeting date, we certainly need to look at this number 5, where it says suitable and intended for use as a factory, mill shop, this and that. That needs to be,
Very changed a lot, yeah.
yeah. And then we need to decide whether it needs to be, how much broader and what terms need to be used in there, what words. Does it need to be and other such things, or does it need to say, you know, data processing or whatever, you know, whatever the words are that, you know, because this is pretty, it's very limited as it's written currently. Now that's something that we certainly need to discuss. Now,
I've heard of data processing in 1962 when they said it.
I'm still confused
I
on,
think that's like Google and Douglas County.
Mhm.
I mean, you just wouldn't even touch Google.
Well,
you know, of course, if you could change that, you could say, well, And then somehow we gotta figure out this other animal, and maybe that's an airport authority.
I don't think we can touch that. I think that's something to do with the commissioners and the airport, because we're limited what we, I mean, we can't change this.
You can give recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. Y'all can't change that.
That's right.
That's-
Yeah.
Only the
Right, well,
Board
we'll
of
make a
Commissioners.
recommendation.
You can recommend, if you think the two animals need to be separated in some shape, form, or fashion, you can write that in a report and give it to the Board of Commissioners. Cause, I mean, they may or may not do it. They may or may not do what you write in that, or it's
no, I agree.
changing deed.
I agree.
But if you split him up, either he'll go to airport or he'll go IBA, so then you're gonna increase payroll. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
that's- yeah,
Well, not
on the surface, to
necessarily.
me, is we got Jamie Gilbert's already getting paid to do,
economic development.
yeah.
Economic development.
Which is, maybe, you know, I'm gonna be straightened out on that later as well, but, you know, maybe they are two totally different things, and I believe they are to some degree, but I think they're very similar in many ways as well.
What happens if you put somebody who's not an engineer in charge of
Yes,
development?
Well, we're, you know, anything we do really is just a recommendation. The commissioners will do what they want, and they'll do what's best, in their opinion.
And it's gonna change in each election cycle,
Right.
which is all right.
All right, before you set the next meeting, talk about open meetings to comply with the law.
Yes, I would like for Tommy to discuss with us how we.
I
can
got, I
comply
sent
with the law.
y'all a little write-up that Jason Phillips did. Okay. You can have as many call meetings as you want. You gotta announce 24 hours, you gotta tell Rebecca, the secretary needs to tell Rebecca, give her an agenda, and she'll make the proper announcements for called meetings. But you need to set some sort of regular meetings, but you're gonna meet once a quarter, or your regular meeting is September the 31st
Let's just
and
do that.
November the 30th, and then you'll do call meetings for the rest of them, because you don't really know what you're gonna do.
I wanna ask Raymond, I wouldn't think we'd need to meet more than twice more.
Well,
I don't know, we just don't.
we'll be either, actually. I
Words
think,
tonight, you
I'm
know.
hoping the next meeting we can,
Come to
I've got, you know, if we can all come back with something written down with some suggestions some recommendations, and hopefully we can take those collectively and, reduce them to something that we can put
Want
in.
to do the last Thursday of every month?
What is, like the 20?
You can do it as far as quarterly. I mean, you
Or
can,
fourth
they
Thursday.
just,
I don't wanna, I'll be honest with you,
I'd like to get it off Thursday, to be honest with you. I have to travel.
I'm
so I
saying you
usually
don't,
leave town on
you
a
can
Wednesday.
meet more often, they just want a regular meeting.
Well, that's some of it, yes, but.
You can even cancel the meeting.
Okay.
But for publishing in the paper, you need to set your regular meeting schedule for the rest
So
of the
what day of the
year.
week works for everyone? Well, you're retired.
I'm
It
retired.
doesn't
I'm not
matter.
retired.
You're just traveling.
I'm retired. I'll come anytime, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you know it's gonna come in with your golf shirt, on, that's okay.
No.
Raymond did.
Yeah, I don't care.
Make it for you working people, whatever y'all wanna do.
Earlier in the week.
Mondays are bad for me, Monday and Tuesday typically, but any other.
Can't do it on fourth Tuesday, because you're here.
I can't do Wednesdays, I'm not gonna mess up anybody's church house, so.
Yeah, you just can't do it.
Not all of us are Baptist,
You can't
right?
have this room.
You what?
I said, not all of us are Baptists.
What, are some of you heathens?
No, some of us are saved.
I'm not gonna
Decline in battle.
Let's don't get into
I thought the
religion,
FBA
politics
means
is bad enough.
All right, but in that case, then let's meet, the fourth Thursday of every month. And then we'll either meet or cancel or meet somewhere there. All right, Mike, well, make a suggestion, man, all you say is what you can't do, tell us what you can do.
I'm just looking, I've got,
You're shaking your head, man,
okay,
every
the
day.
fourth Thursday in August I can make.
Well, look, anybody that can't
The
make it,
fourth Thursday in September I cannot make.
Well,
It's my birthday and I'm not gonna make it.
What about July? Can you make the fourth Thursday of July?
So we got, 1, 2, 3, rest of the 24th.
Yes. Yes.
anybody that can't show up, please make their recommendations through the email to Raymond, just, so
I think I got it done before September.
Yeah, me too. All right, so,
Since we can't do
currently-
anything anyway, I think we're pretty well.
Well,
The
we
fourth
we
Wednesday
did
of
the
each month.
24th of July and the
28th of August.
28th of August, I can make both of those.
Let's just do it, all right?
Okay.
Can everybody make Mike's dates?
Yeah.
But now, is that your
So,
regular
I'll put it out
meeting
there.
schedule for the rest of the calendar
So
year?
4 Thursdays gonna be your regular meeting?
Yeah.
Well, are those two the only, are those your only meeting,
No,
regular?
we're gonna meet,
Just
we're
say
gonna
the
meet,
fourth
and then we can
Thursday.
cancel it after that if we
Yeah.
get it done.
So you're gonna say the rest, this is the
2014.
secretary's, for the rest of 2014?